Hello there. Yeah, there is a video, and I will play it and show it on the screen. So let me play it now.
I wrote letters last week talking about the work at the foundation, sharing some of the problems, and Warren Buffett had recommended I do that, being honest about what was going well, what wasn't, and making it kind of an annual thing. A goal I had there was to draw more people in to work on those problems, because I think there are some very important problems that don't get worked on naturally. That is, the market does not drive the scientists, the communicators, the thinkers, the governments to do the right things. And only by paying attention to these things and having brilliant people who care and draw other people in can we make as much progress as we need to. So this morning I'm going to share two of these problems and talk about where they stand. But before I dive into those, I want to admit that I am an optimist. Any tough problem, I think it can be solved. And part of the reason I feel that way is looking at the past. Over the last century, average lifespan has more than doubled. Another statistic, perhaps my favorite, is to look at childhood deaths. As recently as 1960, 110 million children were born, and 20 million of those died before the age of 5. 5 years ago, 135 million children were born, so more, and less than 10 million of them died before the age of 5. So that's a factor of 2 reduction in the childhood death rate. It's a phenomenal thing. I mean, each one of those lives matters a lot. And the key reason we were able to do it was not only rising incomes, but also a few key breakthroughs, vaccines that were used more widely. For example, measles was 4 million of the deaths back as recently as 1990, and now is under 400,000. So we really can make changes. The next breakthrough is to cut that 10 million in half again. And I think that's doable in well under 20 years. Why? Well, there's only a few diseases that account for the vast majority of those deaths. Diarrhea, pneumonia, and malaria. And so that brings us to the first problem that I'll raise this morning, which is how do we stop a disease, a deadly disease, that's spread by mosquitoes? Well, what's the history of this disease? It's been a severe disease for thousands of years. In fact, if we look at the genetic code, it's the only disease we can see that people who live there actually evolved several things to avoid malarial deaths. Deaths actually peaked at a bit over 5 million in the 1930s. So it was absolutely gigantic. And the disease was all over the world. Terrible disease. It was in the United States. It was in Europe. People didn't know what caused it the early 1900s when a British military man figured out that it was mosquitoes. So it was everywhere. And 2 tools helped bring the death rate down. One was killing the mosquitoes with DDT, and the other was treating the patients with quinine or quinine derivative. And so that's why the death rate did come down. Now, ironically, what happened was it was eliminated from all the temperate zones, which is where all the rich countries are. So we can see 1900, it's everywhere. 1945, it's still most places. 1970, the US and most of Europe have gotten rid of it. 1990, we've gotten most of the northern areas. And then more recently, it's just around the equator. And so this leads to the paradox that because the disease is only in the poor countries, it doesn't get much investment. For example, there's more money put into baldness drugs than are put into malaria. Now, baldness is a terrible thing. And rich men are afflicted. And so that's why that priority has been set. But malaria, even the million deaths a year caused by malaria greatly understate its impact. Over 200 million people at any one time are suffering from it. Means that you can't get the economies in these areas going because it holds things back so much. Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience. Those mosquitoes are not infected, but so we've come up with a few new things. We've got bed nets, and bed nets are a great tool. What it means is the mother and child stay under the bed net at night, and so the mosquitoes that bite late at night can't get at them. And when you use indoor spraying with DDT and those nets, you can cut deaths by over 50%. And that's happened now in a number of countries. It's great to see. But we have to be careful because malaria, the parasite evolves and the mosquito evolves. So every tool that we've ever had in the past has eventually become ineffective. And so you end up with two choices. If you go into a country with the right tools in the right way and you do it vigorously, you can actually get a local eradication. And that's where we saw the malaria map shrinking. Or if you go in kind of half-heartedly, for a period of time you'll reduce the disease burden, but eventually those tools will become ineffective and the death rate will soar back up again. And the world has gone through this where it paid attention and then didn't pay attention. Now we're on the upswing. BedNet funding is up. There's new drug discovery going on. Our foundation has backed a vaccine that's going into phase 3 trial that starts in a couple months. And that should save over 2/3 of lives if it's effective. And so we're going to have these new tools. But that alone doesn't give us the roadmap. Because the roadmap to get rid of this disease involves many things. It involves communicators to keep the funding high, to keep the visibility high, to tell the success stories. It involves social scientists, so we know how to get not just 70% of people to use the bed nets, but 90%. We need mathematicians to come in and simulate this, do Monte Carlo things to understand how these tools combine and work together. Of course, we need drug companies to give us their expertise. We need rich world governments to be very generous in providing aid for these things. And so as these elements come together, I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to eradicate malaria. Well, now let me turn to a second question, a fairly different question, but I'd say equally important. And this is, how do you make a teacher great? Now, it seems like the kind of question that people would spend a lot of time on and that we'd understand very well. And the answer is, really, that we don't. Let's start with why this is important. Well, all of us here, I'll bet, had some great teachers. We all had a wonderful education. That's part of the reason we're here today, part of the reason we're successful. I can say that, even though I'm a college dropout. I had great teachers. And in fact, in the United States, the teaching system has worked fairly well. There are fairly effective teachers in a narrow set of places. So the top 20% of students have gotten a good education. And those top 20% have been the best in the world if you measure them against the other top 20%. And they've gone on to create the revolutions in software and biotechnology and keep the US at the forefront. Now, the strength for those top 20% is starting to fade on a relative basis. But even more concerning is the education that the balance of people are getting. Not only has that been weak, it's getting weaker. And if you look at the economy, it really is only providing opportunities now to people with a better education. And so we have to change this. We have to change it so that people have equal opportunity. We have to change it so that the country is strong and stays in the forefront of things that are driven by advanced education, like science and mathematics. When I first learned the statistics, I was pretty stunned at how bad things are. Over 30% of kids never finish high school. And that had been covered up for a long time because they always took the dropout rate as the number who started in senior year and then compared it to the number that finished senior year, because they weren't tracking where the kids were before that. But most of the dropouts had taken place before that. So they had to raise the stated dropout rate as soon as that tracking was done to over 30%. For minority kids, it's over 50%. And even if you graduate from high school, if you're low income, you have less than a 25% chance of ever completing a college degree. If you're low income in the United States, you have a higher chance of going to jail than you do of getting a four-year degree. And that, doesn't seem entirely fair. So how do you make education better? Our foundation for the last 9 years has invested in this. There's many people working on it. We've worked on small schools. We've funded scholarships. We've done things in libraries. A lot of these things had a good effect. But the more we looked at it, the more we realized that having great teachers was the very key thing. And so we hooked up with some people studying how much variation is there between teachers, between, say, the top quartile, the very best, and the bottom quartile. How much variation is there within a school or between schools? And the answer is that these variations are absolutely unbelievable. A top quartile teacher will increase the performance of their class based on test scores by over 10% in a single year. What does that mean? Well, that means if the entire US for 2 years had top quartile teachers, the entire difference between us and Asia would go away. And within 4 years, we would be blowing everyone in the world away. So it's simple. All you need is those top quartile teachers. And so you'd say, well, wow, that's good. We should reward those people. We should retain those people. We should find out what they're doing and transfer that skill to other people. But I can tell you that absolutely is not happening today. What are the characteristics of this top quartile? What do they look like? You might think, well, these must be very senior teachers. And the answer is no. Once somebody is taught for 3 years, their teaching quality does not change thereafter. The variation is very, very small. You might think, well, these are people with master's degrees. They've gone back and they've gotten their master's of education. This chart takes 4 different factors and says how much do they explain teaching quality. That bottom thing, which says there's no effect at all, is a master's degree. Now, the way the pay system works is there's 2 things that are rewarded. One is seniority, because your pay goes up and you vest into your pension. And the second is giving extra money to people who get their master's degrees. But it in no way is associated with being a better teacher. Teach for America, slight effect. For math teachers, majoring in math is a measurable effect. But overwhelmingly, it's your past performance. There are some people who are very good at this. And we've done almost nothing to study what that is and to draw it in, to replicate it, to raise the average capability, or to encourage the people with it to stay in the system. You might say, well, do the good teachers stay and the bad teachers leave? The answer is, on average, the slightly better teachers leave the system, and it's a system with very high turnover. Now, there are a few places, very few, where great teachers are being made. A good example of one is a set of charter schools called KIPP. KIPP means knowledge is power. It's an unbelievable thing. They have 66 schools, mostly middle schools, 7 high schools, and what goes on is great teaching. They take the poorest kids, and over 96% of their high school graduates go to four-year colleges. And the whole spirit and attitude in those schools is very different than in the normal public school. They're team teaching. They're constantly improving their teachers. They're taking data, the test scores, and saying to a teacher, hey, you caused this amount of increase. And so they're deeply engaged in making teaching better. When you actually go and sit in one of these classrooms, at first it's very bizarre. I sat down and I thought, what is going on? The teacher was running around and the energy level's high. I thought, well, I'm in the sports rally or something. What's going on? And the teacher was constantly scanning to see which kids weren't paying attention, which kids were bored, and calling on kids rapidly, putting things up on the board. It was a very dynamic environment because particularly in those middle school years, 5th or 8th grade, keeping people engaged and setting the tone that everybody in the classroom needs to pay attention. Nobody gets to make fun of it or have the position of, the kid who doesn't want to be there. Everybody needs to be involved. And so KIPP is doing it. How does that compare to a normal school? Well, in a normal school, teachers aren't told how good they are. The data isn't gathered. In the teacher's contract, it will limit the number of times the principal can come into the classroom, sometimes to once per year. And they need advance notice to do that. So imagine running a factory where you've got these workers, some of them just making crap, and the management is told, hey, you can only come down here once a year, but you need to let us know because we might actually fool you and try and do a good job in that one brief moment. Even a teacher who wants to improve doesn't have the tools to do it. They don't have the test scores. And there's a whole thing of trying to block the data. For example, New York passed a law that said that the teacher improvement data could not be made available and used in the tenure decision for the teachers. And so that's sort of working in the opposite direction. But I'm optimistic about this. I think there's some clear things we can do. First of all, there's a lot more testing going on, and that's given us the picture of where we are. And that allows us to understand who's doing it well and call them out and find out what those techniques are. Of course, digital video is cheap now. Putting a few cameras in the classroom and saying that things are being recorded on an ongoing basis is very practical in all public schools. And so every few weeks, teachers could sit down and say, okay, here's a little clip of something I thought I did well. Here's a little clip of something I think I did poorly. Advise me when this kid acted up. How should I have dealt with that? And they can all sit and work together on those problems. You can take the very best teachers and kind of annotate it, have it so everyone sees who is the very best teaching this stuff. You can take those great courses and make them available so that a kid could go out and watch the physics course, learn from that. If you have a kid who's behind, you would know you could assign them that video to watch and review the concept. And in fact, these free courses could not only be available just on the internet, but you could make it so that DVDs were always available, and so anybody who has access to a DVD player can have the very best teachers. And so by thinking of this as a personnel system, we can do it much better. There's a book actually about KIPP, the place that this is going on, that Jay Matthews, a news reporter, wrote called Work Hard, Be Nice. And I thought it was so fantastic, gave you a sense of what a good teacher does. I'm going to send everyone here a free copy of this book. Now, we put a lot of money into education, and I really think that education is the most important thing to get right for the country to have as strong a future as it should have. In fact, we have in the stimulus bill, it's interesting, the House version actually had money in it for these data systems, and was taken out in the Senate because there are people who are threatened by these things. But I'm optimistic. I think people are beginning to recognize how important this is, and it really can make a difference for millions of lives if we get it right. Well, I only had time to frame those two problems. There's a lot more problems like that. AIDS, pneumonia. I can just see you're getting excited just at the very name of these things. And the skill sets required to tackle these things are very broad. You know, the system doesn't naturally make it happen. Governments don't naturally pick these things in the right way. The private sector doesn't naturally put its resources into these things. So it's going to take brilliant people like you to study these things, get other people involved, and you're helping to come up with solutions. And with that, I think there's some great things that will come out of it. Thank you.
So then, that's chased a few people away, hasn't it? Yeah, it goes on a little while, but how much of that did you follow? Did you follow a lot of it?
Yeah, I'm following from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. So, how many topics did he cover?
Education.
2. Malaria.
Malaria and education in the United States.
Yeah. So, first he spoke about malaria.
Yes.
Then he went on to speak about education, and he did make a few points. So let me go through and ask what you can remember. Igor, can you tell me something that you remember from the video?
Yes, but I wasn't from beginning, but I can say what I understand. That in Africa, I think, is malaria, and someone invented something that stops malaria to these insects, stops to come in home, and this will decrease the deaths of malaria on 50%.
Yeah.
And another topic was education in the United States. That in the United States only 20% of schools of high schools are good quality.
Was it 20% of schools, or was he speaking about 20% of students or schools? I don't know.
Schools.
Schools. Mm-hmm. And how does that compare to the education system in your country?
I don't know. I think his education is how to say more badly from how to say
Worse.
is not so good that in the United States. It's
but he was quite critical of the education system in parts of his country. I feel that the situation in my country is quite similar, that the top 20% are at the top of the world, but the bottom are way down, and there seems to be this kind of imbalance, whereas in some countries they seem to have a bit more of a balanced approach to the different sectors, and so people who are receiving a reasonable education in the middle somewhere. So do you think in your country that it's imbalanced or balanced?
What do you mean imbalanced or
I
balanced?
mean, he was critical of his own country's education system, said some good things about it. So it seemed to be imbalanced in the sense that the top 20% or the top quartile were doing very well, but
Yes.
the bottom were not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the same pattern here. I see that the top 20% are at the top of the world, leading in every sphere, and universities and people like well, top scientists and developers and people. But in the bottom, or at the bottom of the scale, there are people who are really not receiving a good education at all.
Mm-hmm. So here I think education is bad quality. It's not something good quality.
Could you enlarge on that? Could you tell me why it's not and what the problems are, in your view?
Because the system that how teachers teach, it's not something. Programs are not new. All the information is old. It's based on information that 10 years ago was, and the teacher are not interested in teach enthusiastic. They teach because they have a small payment, and they only come to lessons and how to say, only come to lessons and do this lesson, but not with enthusiasm.
Ah, yes. Now, okay, let me ask Furkan. Can you tell me something that they were speaking about regarding education? What did you learn from the speech? What can you remember?
I remember the teacher's part. He told something like there are very good teachers and we should reward them, and we should urge them to better teachers. But unfortunately, our system is not working like that. We reward the master's degrees or other degrees, and we think that old teachers or senior teachers is likely to better than the others, but it is not true. And most of the time, a younger teacher or other teachers are better than that, and unfortunately we're losing those high quality teachers.
And did he say anything about how we could fix this? What methods could we, or what could we implement, or what changes in the system would be better?
I remember that there were very few schools that using those systems, 66 schools I guess. And on these schools, teachers are very interested in their students. They always try to make classes dynamic, and they didn't want students be bored or the kind of stuff to make it better.
So, if you were a politician, then what kind of changes do you think we could implement? What rules or procedures actually? I suppose the first question would be the problem. What do you think the main problem is?
I think it's about the teachers, like he said before. We don't reward the best good teachers, and they lose their enthusiasm, and it makes the education worse.
So, do you think that if we reward good teachers, then that would fix everything?
No, not everything, but it will be a good beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Let's just see if we've got some other people here. Paolo, hi. Were you listening, Paolo? Paolo, are you there? Hello? You look like you're sleeping, Paolo.
Yes.
Hello there.
Paolo Santaella, do you hear us?
I'm sure he's not here.
No, I think so.
Okay, so what did you get from this then, Unai Kano? Did you hear it all?
Yes. For example, I think in Spain, in my country, the education is very bad because we decide very late what want to be. Maybe when we were 18 years old, and for me it's very late. We love general me late. No, I know the notice before maybe something
It
like this.
sounds breaking up a lot here for me. Can everybody else hear?
Yeah.
You can hear clearly? Okay.
No, it's a little choppy.
No, it's very. Maybe he have to turn his camera off.
Maybe, yes. Sometimes when the sound isn't good, it's a good idea to turn your camera off when you're speaking. But yeah, try again. Okay, say some more.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
That's much better.
Yes.
Much better. Yes. So, what was the most interesting thing that you heard him say? Can you tell me something that you heard Bill Gates say that's quite interesting?
I think that the teacher have to improve their skills. They can see them in the video camera because they are recording, and for me this is a good idea.
And did you feel that some people were against sharing information because they felt maybe that it was against their personal privacy or something like that? Was anybody speaking about not sharing information properly?
I don't know.
But only Bill Gates speak on this.
When Bill Gates was speaking about New York, what did he say about New York?
That New York is a school, is a high school kid, I think.
And they passed a law about not sharing data with teachers, I guess.
Something about teachers' performance, I think it was. Let's have a look. See if I can find that piece.
As a performance high school in New York, KIT, I think, and the teachers teach with new methods.
He did speak about a particular organization which was doing very well. Who can remember the name of that?
KIT.
KIPP, yes. KIPP. And he was quite critical of a law that was passed in the United States. So let me find that for you. And what did he say about teachers improving when they have had some experience?
Could you repeat your question?
What did he say about the way that teachers improve when they have already had some years of experience? After some years of teaching, what did he say about the possibility of improvement?
He said that the teacher don't improve after a few years.
After third 3 years, their teaching skills do not change. They remain the same.
Can anybody give me some language to describe this? So, for example, describe that kind of person who has reached a stage where they're not changing very much.
Static.
Static, yes. Are there any phrases that you know to describe a person who has become static in this thinking and in their progress? One phrase that I know is to be or to become. to become or be set in your ways. Do you know this one? If you're set in your ways. Yeah, so if you become set in your ways, it means that you just stay as you are, and your mind is not looking for new things and progress, but you are just continuing in a certain way which you have become used to. And can you give me any more adjectives to describe somebody like this? So static is maybe not a very clear adjective to use, but what other adjectives could we use to describe people like this?
Traditional.
Yeah, traditional is often used in a negative sense like this, isn't it? So if you're traditional, then it may be positive, but sometimes it's used in this negative sense. There's one phrase which we sometimes use in England, fuddy-duddy. That's a strange one. Something that means that you've stopped thinking about new things. You've given up on thinking about new things in a new way. You're just continuing as you used to be. Traditional, that's another one. Any more?
Maybe conservative.
Conservative, yeah. And what about the opposite then? What about somebody? Can we have some adjectives to describe the kind of teachers that he was more enthusiastic about? Those great teachers in the KIP organization.
Dynamic teacher.
Dynamic.
Innovative.
Dynamic.
What was yours, Igor?
Innovative.
Yeah, but we need the pronunciation. In innovation, but how do we say this word?
Innovative.
Yeah, but the stress is where?
Innovative.
Yeah, it's more like that.
Way.
Innovate, innovative. So it's a bit like the verb. So to innovate, and innovation is a kind of a noun, yes. So we've got dynamic, we've got innovative. What else could we give for these people?
Creative.
Progressive. Yeah.
Creative, can we say creative?
Say that again.
Creative.
Creative, yeah, that's a positive one, isn't it? So we're getting more positive ones than negative. Innovative, dynamic, progressive, creative. Maybe there are some more.
Can we say talented?
Talented, yeah. Can talented be? It's used positively, but if somebody is talented, then it means that they are able to do it very well. They have an inbuilt ability. They're talented.
Very
Yes.
kinetic.
What do you think about great teachers? Do you think that they have to be the most knowledgeable in the subject that they're teaching, or do you think something else? What do you think is the most important thing? What makes a great teacher, Furkan?
In my opinion, they have to communicate very well with the students, because he can know everything about that subject, but if he can't tell to us or teach to us that subject in good communication ways, it doesn't work for us. And many teachers, unfortunately, doing the wrong way. And there are some other teachers that I had some teachers that had low knowledge about that topic, but they knew how to teach that, and they was very helpful for my education. I still remember that teachers.
I agree with that, everything you've said about that, and I've seen it not just at school, but in chess as well. I've seen it. I've seen some people who are very strong and grandmasters, and they can't really teach the game. And I've seen it in sport, in tennis, and other places. So, do we all agree with what Furkan said? Taman, are you here? You know, what about you? Do you agree with Furkan? Can you add anything about what you think makes a good teacher?
Yes, I agree. I think the teacher is very important, are very important.
Well, teachers are important, but what makes a great teacher?
Yes, yes.
To have plan.
It's important to make great teachers.
And why are some teachers good and some less good, in your opinion?
Can I participate?
Talan, yes?
I think the teachers to be qualified in teaching have two things. They should have two things. First of all, to have experience, a good, excellent experience in his subject which he wants to teach. Second thing is to have to have diploma in teaching and good way in explaining. Maybe the teacher have excellent experience in his subject, but doesn't have the way to explain his ideas.
And you mentioned a diploma. Do you think that a diploma is essential?
Yes, of course, but in addition to that, to have a style, to have way in his explaining, to have to be a qualified teacher, it is not enough. The style and the way in explaining the ideas are very essential.
And do you remember any teachers from school days? Could you tell me about any teachers that inspired you?
My English teacher in the secondary school was very creative teacher in his way of teaching.
And can you give me an example of something he did? I remember one teacher who.
Let me remember. This happened 10 years ago.
Okay. Well,
he used teaching what we called in English. He used teaching means, especially to teach us.
And what kind of things would he do to inspire you? What special tricks or techniques or things did he do to make you interested in what you were learning? Do you remember, Furkan? Do you remember any special tricks?
She made us to, for example, if we have in the book Dialogue, bring two students to act the personalities and to read from the book.
So a little bit of participation.
And to bring photos of the pictures with which she want us to learn. For example, if she wanted to make us memorize the apple in English, each apple, she brought the photo of the apple and tell us, look, it's an apple.
Right, okay, let me just go to Igor for a moment now. Just a moment, let me just go to Igor. Igor, could you give me one example of a technique used by a teacher? Maybe not technique, but anything that they did which you remember and made you feel positive?
The teachers that have good mood. I like teachers with good mood, with with how to say, how they with their approach to teach. Dynamic teachers, I liked.
And did anybody here have Igor, let me ask you first. Did you ever have any classes at school where the teachers had any discipline problems?
What do you mean?
I mean, unruly children, people who didn't want to learn and were causing problems?
Yes, of course.
And what would happen in that case?
They depends. They call parents and said that parents should come to school and discuss with parents about his son or daughter.
So do you think it's very important that parents know about what's going on at school?
Yes, of course, because child is he do not understand, and parents maybe will help him to understand what's going on.
What about you, Furkan? Were you ever in trouble at school?
Yeah, like discipline?
Yeah, did you ever get into trouble with the teachers?
Not exactly, but I saw some teachers having discipline problems, especially in high school. My music teacher was, how can I say it, merciful maybe, and he didn't know how to control the class. And I remember that one group of students was settled at the end of the class, back of the class, and started to sing, and teacher just watched them and started to cry and left the class.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And how did that make the students feel?
Students didn't feel anything. They didn't care the teacher.
And were most of the class being disruptive, or just a few?
I think that teacher was having some problems with the controlling teacher, because I remember that my biology teacher just at the first day of the school settled a very great disciplined environment, and in his classes even one student didn't open his mouth.
Whoa. So you have very different kinds of teachers in the same school at the same time.
Yes.
And would you prefer to be in a class where the teacher was very strict, or a class where the teacher was less strict?
I think mixture of it.
So how do you think a good teacher should keep control?
I don't know. For example, my biology teacher controlled the class just with talking. He talked about his past experiences with students, and it was enough to scare all other students.
So it's a question of the relationship between the teachers and the students.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And he spoke about high turnover. Do you remember this speech? Bill Gates was speaking about high turnover. What does high turnover refer to usually?
When employees go and come to its employees, when they fired or they leave the job and come another employees.
Yeah, lots of staff turnover. And is that a good thing?
No.
No. So if a school or an organization has high turnover, then what does it lack?
That an organization is a problem, any kind of problems.
And so if you were to say one or two things that it lacks when there's a high turnover, the opposite of a high turnover, low turnover, what does that give you? Low turnover is a good thing, it's positive, we said. So what does that give you? Could you maybe give me some nouns or some phrases that it gives an organization?
It means that organization is stability. And
Yeah,
organization
stability. Yeah, stability is one, I think. Stability is a good one. Stability, yes. Of course, you can just write in the Verbling chat. That's what the Verbling chat's for. In the future, I'm going to only have people in class who are speaking, talking. So everybody here has been speaking, and that's why we've only got 4 people here at the moment. Because if somebody comes to the class and they don't speak, then I would prefer that they listen from outside. So there should be a space now to join. So please just join if you can. But if you feel that it's too noisy, your background is too noisy, or anything like that, then it's fine to just ask questions in the text.
I have a question. Could you briefly explain the turnover?
Turnover, yeah, change in staff levels. So if people are leaving their job and new people are coming in, then why do we use the word turnover? Probably because if you think about, I'm just guessing now, but if you think about turning over something like in a field or in agriculture, then it's changing it, isn't it? So you're making something fresh come in. If you have a pile of potatoes, I don't know, then if they don't turn over, then it's just always in the same position. But turnover is often used in money as well, high turnover. So in a business sense, do you know what turnover means if you speak about turnover?
According to your explanation, it means people are leaving and new people are getting into high rates.
That's the way it's used if we speak about employees and human resources. They would speak about turnover this way, but somebody who works in accounts would use it in another way. If they speak about turnover, then what do you think they might mean if they say high turnover?
That
positive.
Company have big profits and they buy materials and produce and after that have profits, and this is a circle.
Can you just go a little bit further there, Igor, and could you just tell me how profits are related to turnover? Because I believe that you could have quite a low turnover but high profit, but you could have a higher profit, you could have a higher turnover and actually a smaller profit. So what is the relationship exactly between profit and turnover?
Cycles.
So yeah, turnover in that sense is all of the work and business that you do. So buying and selling is a turnover, but it doesn't always lead to profit.
From producing a product to selling, and again to produce and sell, and this is one cycle.
Yes, so actually some companies can have a problem where they're producing and selling an awful lot, but their profit is very low.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can have a very high turnover, but very low profit because your profit margin is not set properly. Or maybe for another reason, maybe you are deliberately trying to gain market share. And one way you might deliberately gain market share is to drop the prices.
But usually companies that have high turnover, they have good profits. They do not work for nothing. They work for profit.
Well, turnover is business, so it's got to be good, yes.
Yes,
but
that's why it exists business.
Yeah, but you can see that it's not all about just turnover. And there is an expression where people sometimes say that they're buying work, that they're actually just too desperate for the work, and so they're dropping their prices too much and getting quite a high turnover, but it's not good business.
Can I ask where? Can you give an example of such a business where they
Often,
drop prices
yeah,
low and
yeah,
work for nothing?
they might be doing they might be operating some kind of loss leader policy on a new product. So, for example, they want to bite into the market. So, I know Tesco's do this. Supermarkets do this all the time. So, for example, when I was in Hungary, I saw the British company Tesco's doing this to local suppliers. They do it like this. They actually operate a high turnover and a negative profit, so they actually work a deliberate loss.
I don't think so. They work with profit. Every company.
Well, British
maybe
companies don't. They sometimes work with a deliberate loss because they go for the long term. So they know that if they can undercut, if they can sell at a cheaper price than the opposition or the competition.
But one moment, if you sell for a cheaper price, your customer will expect that you will sell this product all time for cheaper price, and this is not good. And this is a stupid way.
Well, it works though. It works in supermarkets, because what happens is that sometimes a small. It also works in another business sector which I know of, which is cartels and shipping. So if you have a new operator which comes into town and tries to offer cheap prices, then the bigger companies will drop their prices for a period of time until they are forced out of business. And so you can actually do this deliberately and then make money maybe later.
I know more good strategy, better strategy, to offer a different product with different quality and price to be the same or maybe higher, because if it will be lower and you do not have profit, it will be very bad.
It all depends on the markets. Every market has its own different problems, I think. So if you're just selling bread to people who are looking for cheap bread, then you're limited in the product.
But bread is a regulated product. You cannot put your own price on bread. This is regulated by government. This is not a profitable business. This is business for people, how to say. Milk, bread, with all kind of products here in my country is regulated by government.
Well, regulated.
I
think that regulation is a good thing, and most of the world today seems to be coming round to the view that free market fundamentalism is not that good. Actually, even Bill Gates, who you might expect to be the ultimate capitalist, also mentioned something along these lines about he slightly criticized free market fundamentalism in that it was not going to help solve certain problems. Do you remember this?
No.
I'm going to look for it.
No, me neither.
So it's very interesting, actually, because he mentioned, and you might think that people like Bill Gates would be only saying that free market fundamentalism or the market forces will drive everything in the right direction and everything will be fixed by markets and market forces. But let me find it before we finish. So I think it might have been quite near the end. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. I can just see you're getting excited about these problems, just at the very name of these things. And the skill sets required to tackle these things are very broad. You know, the system doesn't naturally make it happen. Governments don't naturally pick these things in the right way. The private sector doesn't naturally put its resources into these things. So we need foundations, regulations, and this seems to be the way the world is going in the West at the moment. We had in Britain renationalisation of some banks. We had in the US, we've got more regulations coming in, and people are critical of this, but the movement seems to be a little bit that way, in that direction. And Bill Gates himself says that the private sector doesn't naturally put its resources into these things. He also mentioned baldness. Do you remember?
No.
What did he say about baldness?
No.
In the first one about health, he also mentioned this. He said that baldness had more money spent on it than...
Oh, yes.
Why? Why? It's the free market economy.
What is baldness?
He said that baldness, that's what I've got. I've got no hair on my head. Well, just a little. But baldness is when men lose their hair. Mm-hmm. And more money is spent on this than on malaria. Why? Because people want to spend their money on it.
Yeah. Because exists...
So if we want a good world, we have to have a balance between economies and private sector and governments and regulation.
Because who have boldness has boldness will buy this product, but people from who have malaria, they do not have money to buy. That's why companies interested in producing goods for money.
Yes, so today we have the view of some that the private sector is a great thing to have, and it's good that there should be a private sector and there should be these market forces, but if we leave everything to market forces, then lots of these kind of things like malaria or poor people's education will not be solved. And so we need regulation and a private sector. So it seems to be the way of the world today, that we're moving slightly away from the idea that a free market economy can cope with everything and everything will find its place. And what do you think? Do you think that regulations are necessary?
Yes, maybe yes, but I think the government of the rich countries don't care about the poor countries' disease. Not at all.
Well, I can't say I agree totally with what you're saying, but it is a problem that if we leave everything to corporations and to the free market economy, then it could be that we see that problem. But if we have some regulations and we have some kind of government driven not entirely by corporate money and corporate desires, then it could be that we spend more money helping the world and helping Africa and helping malaria. Anyway, I have to go now because we're well over time, so I have to end the class. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
See you again.
Thank
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.